My son sent me to LA for a therapy and wellness. I walked in at the wrong time and heard it was a one-way ticket. Yes, it's a one-way ticket. She'll never come back home. She'll be someone else's problem. I'm standing outside my son's home office door, holding my purse after returning from another humiliating job interview, when I hear him on the phone saying words that would change everything between us forever. Listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you, because this story will shatter every assumption you have about family loyalty, financial recovery, and what happens when people underestimate a woman who's lost everything but her determination to rebuild. Those words hit me like a physical blow, but I just smiled and said, "All right, darling. We'll do it your way." What I did next changed everything. And 20 years later, he still can't sleep at night knowing how spectacularly he underestimated his own mother. Welcome back to Ani Dorothy's Stories. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. Your support truly encourages me to continue sharing these incredible tales with you. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love hearing from my sweethearts around the world. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I lost everything to a financial scam. My business, my savings, my home. At 60 years old, I had to move in with my son like some charity case. But when I overheard him planning my permanent removal from his life, it ignited something inside me that my son never saw coming. Here's what Michael never understood, what he couldn't possibly have imagined. I wasn't just some broken woman who needed permanent management. I was a fighter who'd been temporarily knocked down by the biggest financial fraud scheme in our state's history, and his cruel dismissal was about to become the fuel for a comeback that would leave him speechless and regretful for decades. Let me take you back to where this nightmare really began. 2 years earlier, I was Sarah Mitchell, successful owner of Mitchell Catering, a business I'd built from absolutely nothing over 20 years. I was a single mother who'd raised Michael alone after his father abandoned us when Michael was 3 years old. Every sacrifice I made, every 16-hour workday, every missed social event was for my son's future. My catering company wasn't just successful, it was legendary in the Bay Area. Corporate events, celebrity weddings, political fundraisers, if it mattered, people called Mitchell Catering. I had 47 employees, a state-of-the-art commercial kitchen, and $3 million in savings and investments. I was proud, independent, and financially secure. Then, David Chen came into my life with what seemed like the opportunity of a lifetime. He was charming, sophisticated, and presented himself as a real estate investment expert who'd made millions for his clients. "Sarah, you're missing out on guaranteed returns that could double your retirement savings. These deals are only available to select investors with proven business success." The investment opportunity sounded incredible: luxury real estate developments in emerging markets with 20% annual returns. David showed me documentation, financial projections, testimonials from supposedly satisfied investors. Everything looked legitimate, professional, thoroughly vetted. Over 6 months, I invested everything: my business assets, personal savings, even took out loans against my commercial property. David convinced me that diversifying into real estate was the smart business move that would set me up for life. "Sarah, in 5 years you'll be thanking me for this opportunity. You're going to be wealthier than you ever imagined." The collapse came suddenly and devastatingly. David Chen disappeared overnight, along with $12 million from dozens of victims. The luxury developments didn't exist. The financial documents were forgeries. The testimonials were fake. I lost $3 million in a single day when the FBI raided what turned out to be an elaborate Ponzi scheme operation. The legal battles were brutal and hopeless. My business assets were frozen during the investigation. The bank foreclosed on my commercial property. My personal home went into foreclosure. My credit was destroyed. My employees lost their jobs. Everything I'd built over 20 years vanished in a nightmare of legal proceedings and bankruptcy filings. At 60 years old, I found myself with 2 suitcases of belongings: no home, no business, no savings, and no prospects. The humiliation was crushing. A successful businesswoman reduced to depending on her adult son's charity. Michael had worked his way up to tech executive success, and his $2 million Palo Alto mansion represented everything he'd achieved, despite our humble beginnings. Moving into Michael's guest room felt like the ultimate failure. Here I was, the woman who'd sacrificed everything to give my son opportunities, now living in what used to be his home office, sleeping on a pull-out couch, applying for government assistance while surrounded by his wealth and success. Michael was grateful for my past sacrifices, but clearly embarrassed by my current situation. His wife Jennifer was polite, but uncomfortable with my presence disrupting their perfect lifestyle. The grandchildren Emma and Jake barely knew me and seemed confused by their grandmother's dramatic life change. Family dinners became awkward affairs, dominated by my legal troubles and financial stress. Any word from the investigators, Mom? Have you heard back from any of those job applications? Maybe you should consider lowering your salary expectations. Every conversation reminded everyone that I was the family charity case. Jennifer started dropping hints about my finding independent living arrangements. There are wonderful senior communities with sliding scale fees, Sarah. You might be happier with people in similar situations. People in similar situations, that's how she saw me. A permanent dependent who needed managing rather than a temporarily displaced businesswoman who could recover. Michael's solution came disguised as caring intervention. Mom, I've been researching intensive therapy programs for life transition counseling. There's an amazing program in Los Angeles that specializes in helping people rebuild after major life changes. I think it could really help you adjust your expectations and find peace with your new reality. The family meetings started happening where Michael and Jennifer presented their plan, like concerned children talking to an incompetent parent. We just want what's best for you, Mom. You need professional help to accept that your old life is gone forever. This therapy program would teach you coping skills for your new circumstances. I agreed, because I thought my son genuinely wanted to help me recover from the most devastating loss of my life. I thought this successful man I'd raised with love and values actually cared about his mother's emotional healing. I was about to discover how wrong I was. That job interview was my latest attempt to find work in my field, but at 60, with no current business and destroyed credit, nobody wanted to hire the former owner of a failed catering company. I came home defeated, forgot my purse, and went back to grab it when I heard Michael in his office on the phone. The therapist specializes in helping people transition to realistic expectations. Mom needs to accept she'll never have her old life back. Once she's in LA, she can apply for senior assistance programs there. It's win-win. She gets professional help accepting her limitations, and honestly, we get our lives back. My heart shattered, but this time it wasn't just grief, it was rage. My own son, the child I'd raised to be successful and compassionate, was planning to dump me in Los Angeles permanently, so his perfect family could return to their comfortable routine without the embarrassment of his dependent mother. I stood there in that hallway, tears streaming down my face. But something else was building inside me. Determination. The realization that if my son wanted to underestimate me completely, I was going to let him. And then I was going to show him exactly what happens when you write off someone who built a $3 million business from nothing. If you want to see how Sarah rebuilds her entire empire and gets the ultimate vindication against the son who abandoned her, hit that subscribe button right now, because what happens next will restore your faith in the power of resilience. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been written off by family during your lowest moment? How did you prove them wrong? The next few weeks were the performance of my lifetime. I played the role of a grateful, broken mother accepting her son's wisdom while secretly plotting the biggest comeback Michael would never see coming. He thought he was manipulating a helpless fraud victim, but I was about to turn his manipulation into my liberation. I threw myself into researching everything about the Los Angeles therapy program Michael had chosen. Dr. Amanda Foster specialized in helping people rebuild after financial trauma, and her approach actually seemed legitimate. The irony wasn't lost on me. My son's plan to permanently dispose of me was leading me toward exactly what I needed to recover from the devastation. But Michael had no idea what he was unleashing. While he believed he was sending away a broken woman who'd never recover, I was already making contacts that would change everything. The FBI Financial Crimes Unit had been investigating David Chen's fraud ring, and Detective James Walsh reached out to me for cooperation in building their case. Ms. Mitchell, your business records and testimony are crucial to our investigation. We believe we can recover significant assets for victims, but it requires complete confidentiality during ongoing operations. Detective Walsh explained that other victims included wealthy investors and celebrities, making this a high-profile federal case with serious recovery potential. I agreed to cooperate fully, providing detailed documentation of every transaction, every conversation, every piece of evidence that could help convict David Chen and his associates. But I kept this development completely secret from Michael's family. They wanted to see me as a permanent victim with no prospects. I'd let them maintain that illusion while I worked toward vindication. The hardest part was pretending to be grateful for Michael's concern while knowing he just wanted me permanently out of his life. Thank you so much for researching this program, Michael. I really think it will help me accept my new reality and move forward appropriately. His relief was visible every time I expressed enthusiasm about leaving. Meanwhile, I was having secret phone calls with Detective Walsh about asset recovery prospects. Sarah, we've traced significant funds to overseas accounts. The recovery process will take time, but we're optimistic about returning substantial assets to victims. This investigation is our top priority. Jennifer became increasingly supportive of the LA plan, probably already mentally redecorating my guest room. The grandchildren seemed confused about why Grandma was leaving, but also somewhat relieved that the sad lady wouldn't be making dinner conversations uncomfortable anymore. Michael's behavior during those weeks revealed everything about his character. He started treating me better, probably feeling guilty about his secret plan, but also anticipating the relief of having his life back. He'd bring me coffee, ask about my therapy research, even offer to help me pack, all while believing he was orchestrating my permanent removal. I played my part perfectly, researching grief stages and life transitions, expressing gratitude for his wisdom and support. You're right, Michael. I need professional help accepting that I'll never have my old life back. This program sounds like exactly what I need to learn realistic expectations. The packing process was particularly cruel. Michael helped me sort through my remaining belongings, encouraging me to take only what I'd need for an extended stay. We can store the rest here for whenever you're ready to figure out permanent housing, Mom. He had no idea I was already planning permanent housing, just not anywhere near his manipulative family. 3 days before departure, Detective Walsh called with news that would change everything. Sarah, we've executed raids and recovered over $15 million in assets. We estimate you'll receive back approximately $2.8 million once legal proceedings conclude. But you cannot discuss this with anyone during the ongoing investigation. I hung up that phone call feeling something I hadn't felt in 2 years. Hope. Not just hope for financial recovery, but hope for vindication. For proving that Sarah Mitchell wasn't finished. For showing my son that he'd abandoned his mother right before her greatest comeback. But the money wasn't what mattered most. What mattered was that Michael had shown me exactly how little faith he had in my resilience and capability. He was willing to deceive me, manipulate my trauma, and permanently remove me from his life, rather than support me through the rebuilding process. The night before leaving, I lay in that guest room thinking about the 35 years since I'd given birth to Michael, all the sacrifices I'd made as a single mother, all the opportunities I'd provided despite financial struggles, all the love, support, and guidance I'd given him through every challenge. And this was how he repaid that devotion, by treating me like a problem to be solved, rather than a mother to be supported. But I also felt excitement building. For the first time since David Chen's fraud destroyed my life, I was looking forward to something. Not just because of the potential asset recovery, but because I was about to discover what Sarah Mitchell could accomplish when she wasn't being undermined by her own family's lack of faith. The morning of departure was almost comical. Michael loaded my suitcases with such enthusiasm, talking about how proud he was of me for taking this step toward accepting reality. Mom, you're going to come back a different person. You'll have tools to handle your new circumstances, maybe even be ready for senior housing. Who knows what opportunities await someone with realistic expectations? He had no idea how right he was about me coming back as a different person. But he also had no idea that I wasn't planning to come back to his house at all, not to his guest room, not to the role of dependent mother who needed his management and charity. Jennifer hugged me goodbye with genuine warmth, probably already planning how to use my former space. The grandchildren waved from the window, sad but not devastated by their grandmother's departure. As we drove to the airport, Michael kept talking about how this was the beginning of my healing journey toward acceptance. "Mom, this program will help you understand that your business days are over. You'll learn to find fulfillment in simpler things, maybe volunteer work or hobby groups. The important thing is adjusting your expectations to match your new reality." He had no idea that my new reality was about to include asset recovery, business opportunities, and a life that would make his current success look modest by comparison. Michael thought he was getting rid of a burden. Instead, he was giving his mother the motivation to rebuild everything bigger and better than before. The flight to Los Angeles was the first time in months I'd felt genuinely optimistic. I wasn't just traveling to therapy. I was traveling toward vindication. Toward proving that the woman who built a $3 million business from nothing wasn't finished. Toward showing my son that betting against Sarah Mitchell was the biggest mistake of his life. As the plane lifted off, I thought about what Michael would feel when he realized what he'd thrown away. The successful, resilient mother he'd abandoned during her lowest moment was about to become more successful than ever. And he was going to have to live with knowing he'd chosen convenience over family loyalty at the moment when faith would have meant everything. Make sure you're subscribed, because Sarah's transformation in Los Angeles is about to be legendary, and you won't believe how completely she rebuilds not just her wealth, but her entire life. Tell me in the comments, what would you do if you discovered your own family was plotting to get rid of you permanently? Los Angeles didn't just change my life. It revealed who Sarah Mitchell really was when she wasn't being defined by other people's limitations and lack of faith. The woman who emerged from Dr. Amanda Foster's therapy program was someone my son had never met and definitely wasn't prepared to handle. Dr. Foster turned out to be everything Michael's research had promised, but not in the way he'd intended. She wasn't helping me accept limitations. She was helping me rediscover strengths I'd forgotten I possessed. "Sarah, you survived raising a child alone, building a multi-million-dollar business from nothing, and losing everything to fraud without losing your core identity. Those aren't the characteristics of someone who should accept reduced expectations." The therapy program was residential, which meant I lived in a beautiful facility surrounded by other people navigating major life transitions. But these weren't just other fraud victims. There were divorced executives rebuilding careers, empty nest mothers discovering new purposes, people who'd lost health or relationships but refused to accept defeat. The energy was infectious and empowering. Within the first week, I met Marcus Rivera, a 58-year-old successful restaurant owner who was facilitating business recovery workshops. Marcus had lost his first restaurant to a business partner's embezzlement, fought his way back, and now owned a thriving consulting firm helping other entrepreneurs recover from setbacks. Our connection was immediate and surprising. We'd both been successful business owners who'd trusted the wrong people. We'd both lost everything, but refused to accept that failure was permanent. We'd both learned that resilience isn't about avoiding disasters, it's about rebuilding better after disasters strike. "Sarah, your catering expertise combined with my restaurant consulting experience could create something powerful. The hospitality industry needs people who understand both excellence and recovery." Marcus wasn't offering charity or pity. He was proposing partnership between equals who'd both proven their ability to succeed. But here's what was really transforming about Los Angeles. I was making decisions based purely on my own judgment for the first time in months. I joined Marcus's business workshops because I wanted to, not because someone else thought it would be therapeutic. I volunteered at community events, because I enjoyed the work, not because I needed to prove my worth. My business background became relevant again when I started consulting with other therapy participants about rebuilding their professional lives. Suddenly, I was using skills and knowledge that had been dormant since the fraud, remembering how competent and valuable I could be when people believed in my capabilities. 3 weeks into the program, Detective Walsh called with an update that made everything even better. "Sarah, the asset recovery is proceeding faster than expected. We've recovered $2.8 million of your funds and expect to return them within 60 days. Additionally, several victims are discussing a class action lawsuit that could result in punitive damages." I hung up that call feeling vindicated in ways that went beyond money. The FBI's success proved that I hadn't been a fool who deserved what happened. I'd been the victim of sophisticated criminals who'd deceived dozens of successful business people. My judgment wasn't flawed. David Chen was just exceptionally skilled at fraud. But the real transformation was happening through my partnership with Marcus. We started developing a comprehensive consulting service for hospitality businesses facing crisis, fraud recovery, partnership disputes, market challenges, family succession planning. My catering experience and his restaurant expertise created something neither of us could have built alone. "Sarah, you have insights about business recovery that come from actually surviving the worst-case scenario. That's invaluable expertise that other entrepreneurs desperately need." Marcus saw my recent trauma not as disqualification but as qualification for helping others navigate similar challenges. The physical transformation was as dramatic as the emotional one. 2 years of stress and 6 months of depression had left me thin and exhausted, but therapy, business planning, regular meals, and genuine hope were bringing me back to life. I bought new clothes that reflected confidence rather than defeat, got a haircut that made me feel attractive rather than invisible. Our consulting business took off immediately. Word spread through Los Angeles business networks about 2 experts who could help companies recover from partnership fraud, embezzlement, and other business disasters. We had more clients than we could handle within the first month of operations. 8 weeks into the program, Michael called for his regular check-in, expecting updates from his defeated mother, who was slowly learning to accept reduced circumstances. "How's the therapy going, Mom? Are you making progress toward accepting your new situation? Do you have a timeline for when you'll be ready for permanent housing assistance?" That's when I realized the moment of truth had arrived. Michael was expecting conversations about government assistance and senior housing. Instead, he was about to learn that his supposedly broken mother had rebuilt her career and was about to recover most of her stolen wealth. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, Michael, about my life, my future, what I want my next chapter to look like. And I've decided I'm staying in Los Angeles permanently. I'm starting a business with my partner Marcus, and we're already profitable." The silence on the phone was deafening. "What do you mean you're starting a business? Mom, you lost everything. You don't have capital or credit or connections. This sounds like another bad decision that's going to end in disaster." The assumption that I was incapable of rebuilding was remarkable. Here was my adult son, who'd manipulated me into leaving his house, now lecturing me about business decisions while having no idea what I'd accomplished in just 2 months. "Actually, Michael, I have plenty of capital. The FBI recovered $2.8 million of my stolen assets. I've been financially independent this entire time you've been planning my permanent removal from your life." The shock in his voice was audible as he processed this information. "You got your money back? When? Why didn't you tell us? How long have you known about this?" His confusion was obvious. He'd been planning to manage a poor, dependent mother, not a millionaire businesswoman who was thriving without his input. "I've known for weeks, but the investigation required confidentiality. More importantly, Michael, I wanted to see if you'd support me during what you believed was permanent poverty, or if you'd abandon me when I became inconvenient. You chose abandonment." But the biggest surprise was still coming. "Michael, there's something else you should know. I'm engaged to Marcus Rivera, a wonderful man who sees my business expertise as an asset rather than my recent trauma as a liability. We're planning a wedding here in Los Angeles this summer." If the money revelation had shocked him, the engagement announcement completely shattered his worldview. His helpless, defeated mother wasn't just financially recovered, she was thriving romantically with a successful man he'd never met, building a business that was already profitable, living a life that didn't require his management or approval. You can't be serious about getting married, Mom. You barely know this man. You're still recovering from losing everything. This sounds like another impulsive decision that's going to end badly. The condescension was breathtaking. Michael had sent me away specifically because he believed I'd never recover. But now that I was not only recovered but more successful than before, suddenly he was concerned about my decision-making. The manipulation was so obvious it was almost laughable. Marcus and I have been working together for 2 months, building a business that's already more profitable than most startups. We're both experienced entrepreneurs who understand partnership, both financially independent, both committed to supporting each other's success rather than managing each other's limitations. The call ended with Michael demanding to meet Marcus and inspect my living situation, as if he had any authority over my choices. I agreed to the visit, but not because I needed his approval. I wanted him to see exactly what he'd thrown away when he chose convenience over family loyalty. Hit that subscribe button because you need to see Michael's complete meltdown when he realizes what he's lost and how Sarah's new life becomes everything he never thought possible. What do you think about Sarah's decision to keep her recovery secret from her manipulative family? Share your thoughts in the comments. 2 weeks later, Michael and Jennifer flew to Los Angeles for what they expected would be a welfare check on their dependent relative. Instead, they were about to meet a version of me they'd never imagined possible. Successful, confident, and completely independent of their opinions or support. I met them at my new condo, a beautiful 2-bedroom space overlooking Santa Monica with a home office where Marcus and I ran our consulting business. The look on their faces when they saw how I was living, successfully, comfortably, without needing anyone's help, was worth every moment of the previous month's uncertainty. This place is incredible, Mom. How are you affording this? Is this some kind of assisted living program? Jennifer was trying to process the cognitive dissonance of seeing her former charity case mother-in-law living better than they were. I showed them the FBI documentation, the asset recovery paperwork, the business registration for Rivera Mitchell Consulting, the client contracts that were already generating 6-figure revenue, your father's fraud victim restitution combined with my new business partnership. I'm not just financially stable, I'm more successful than I was before the fraud. Michael's face went through a series of expressions as he processed this information. Shock at the money recovery, confusion about business success, embarrassment about his assumptions, and the growing realization that every belief about my capabilities had been completely wrong. Then Marcus arrived for dinner, and watching Michael try to find fault with this gentle, successful, intelligent man was almost comical. Marcus was everything any son would want for his mother. Financially stable, emotionally mature, professionally accomplished, clearly devoted to supporting my success rather than managing my limitations. So you met in therapy? And now you're business partners and engaged? This seems very fast, Mom. Are you sure you've thought this through carefully? Michael was still trying to position himself as the concerned son protecting his vulnerable mother. Marcus handled the interrogation with grace and confidence. Michael, your mother and I are both experienced business owners who've survived major setbacks. We're not rebuilding from desperation. We're creating something new from positions of strength and mutual respect. The dinner conversation revealed everything about the different perspectives on my capabilities. Michael kept trying to find problems, risks, reasons why this couldn't be sustainable. Marcus and I demonstrated 2 independent adults who'd chosen each other and built something successful based on complementary expertise. Why Los Angeles, Mom? Why not somewhere closer to family? Michael was still trying to negotiate my choices rather than accept them. Because Los Angeles is where I rediscovered who I am when I'm not being defined by other people's limitations and expectations. I have business partners here, clients who value my expertise, a life that I built based on my own judgment and capabilities, rather than other people's assumptions about what I should accept. Jennifer was processing everything differently than Michael. She asked genuine questions about my business, my volunteer work, and my newfound confidence. She seemed relieved to see me thriving, maybe even inspired by the possibility of rebuilding after devastating setbacks. The grandchildren video called during dinner, and I could see Michael's surprise at how excited Emma and Jake were to talk to me. They wanted to know about the beach, about Marcus, about my business, about when they could visit my new home. Our relationship hadn't disappeared. It had just moved beyond Michael's control and management. After dinner, Michael and I had the conversation that had been building for months. "Mom, I'm confused about why you kept the money recovery secret. I thought I was helping you by finding that therapy program. I never meant for you to just disappear from our lives permanently." "But that's exactly what you planned, Michael. I heard you on the phone. You said it was a one-way arrangement, that I'd never want to come back, that I'd be someone else's problem. You weren't helping me heal. You were removing me because my financial problems were embarrassing for your perfect family." He tried to deny it, then minimize it, then justify it. I was overwhelmed, Mom. I didn't know how to help someone who'd lost everything. I thought professional intervention would teach you coping skills for your new reality. My new reality, Michael, is that I rebuilt everything better than before while you were planning my permanent removal. My new reality is that I discovered I don't need management from people who don't believe in my capabilities. The vulnerability that followed was the first genuine emotion I'd seen from him in months. "I thought you were finished, Mom. I thought the fraud had broken you permanently. I didn't know how to support someone through that kind of rebuilding process." "You didn't try to find out, Michael. You decided what I could handle based on your comfort level rather than my actual capabilities. You chose the solution that was most convenient for your family rather than what might actually help me recover." That honesty hit him harder than anger would have. Michael realized that he hadn't just made a mistake about my prospects. He'd revealed something about his character that couldn't be taken back. When things got difficult, when I needed family support the most, he'd chosen manipulation over communication, convenience over commitment. The visit ended with complicated emotions on all sides. Michael and Jennifer returned to Palo Alto with a completely different understanding of who I was and what I was capable of achieving. They'd expected to find their dependent relative in temporary housing, and instead they'd found a thriving entrepreneur who'd built a new life that didn't require their approval. 3 months later, Marcus and I were married in a ceremony at the Los Angeles County Arboretum. Michael's family attended, and while the relationships were still rebuilding, there was acknowledgement that this was my choice to make as a competent adult. But Michael's real reckoning was just beginning. He'd sent away his mother, believing she was permanently broken, only to discover she was more resilient than he'd ever imagined. He'd planned to remove a burden, and instead had thrown away someone whose success would make his own achievements look modest. The business Marcus and I built became legendary in Los Angeles hospitality circles. Rivera Mitchell Consulting expanded into franchise development, business recovery services, and entrepreneur mentorship. We had waiting lists of clients who wanted our expertise in rebuilding after disasters. 6 months after my wedding, Michael called with news that his own tech company was facing partnership disputes and potential embezzlement charges. "Mom, I don't know who else to ask. Do you think your consulting firm could help us navigate this crisis?" The irony was perfect. The son who'd sent me away because he thought I couldn't handle business challenges was now asking for help with his own business disasters. I agreed to consult on his case, not because I needed his approval, but because I'd learned that success is more satisfying when you use it to help people rather than punish them. Make sure you subscribe because the final transformation and long-term consequences will show you how completely Sarah's success changed not just her life, but her entire family's understanding of resilience and capability. Tell me in the comments, do you think Michael deserved help after what he did? Or should Sarah have refused? 20 years later, I'm sitting in the headquarters of Rivera Mitchell Enterprises, looking out at the Los Angeles skyline from the top floor of a building we own, reflecting on the empire Marcus and I built from the ashes of my son's betrayal and my own determination to prove that writing off Sarah Mitchell was the biggest mistake anyone could make. Our consulting firm didn't just survive. It became the most respected business recovery company on the West Coast. We've helped over 300 businesses recover from fraud, embezzlement, partnership disputes, and market crashes. Our success rate is legendary because we understand both the business side and the emotional side of rebuilding after devastating losses. The financial numbers are staggering, even to me. Rivera Mitchell Enterprises is now worth $47 million. We own commercial real estate, franchise multiple restaurant concepts, and provide consulting services that command premium fees because our expertise is proven by our own comeback story. But the real satisfaction isn't the money, it's the impact. We've saved thousands of jobs, helped hundreds of entrepreneurs rebuild their dreams, and created a model for business recovery that's studied in graduate programs across the country. The fraud that was supposed to destroy me became the foundation for helping others survive similar disasters. Marcus and I celebrated our 19th wedding anniversary last month with a trip to Italy, where we're considering opening our first international consulting office. Our partnership has been the foundation for everything we've built. Two equals supporting each other's success rather than managing each other's limitations. The grandchildren Emma and Jake are now adults with families of their own. They bring my great-grandchildren to visit our beach house regularly, and they treat Marcus like the grandfather they chose, rather than the one they inherited. Our relationships are deeper and more genuine than anything I had during those uncomfortable months in Michael's guest room. But the most remarkable transformation has been in Michael himself. That realization that he'd manipulated away his own mother during her greatest challenge changed him profoundly. He went to therapy, not to fix problems, but to understand why he'd been so willing to discard relationships when they became difficult. He calls me every Sunday now, not because he feels obligated, but because he's learned to value what we have rather than manage what feels challenging. Those conversations are honest, filled with mutual respect, rather than the condescending concern he used to show his supposedly helpless mother. Michael's own business survived the partnership crisis we helped him navigate, and he's become successful in ways that go beyond financial metrics. He learned that supporting people through challenges creates stronger relationships than removing people when they become inconvenient. Jennifer and I have become genuine friends. She often says that seeing me rebuild independently gave her permission to pursue her own ambitions rather than just managing everyone else's needs. She went back to school, started her own marketing firm, became someone I respect and enjoy rather than someone I had to navigate around. The fraud recovery work led to something I never expected: victim advocacy and legislative reform. I testified before Congress about elder financial fraud, helped write California's business fraud victim protection laws, and established a foundation that provides emergency assistance to fraud victims during their recovery period. Detective Walsh, who's now retired, still calls occasionally to update me on fraud cases where our testimony helped convict criminals. Sarah, your willingness to cooperate and rebuild publicly has helped us prosecute dozens of similar schemes. Your success story gives other victims hope that recovery is possible. But here's what Michael still struggles with. What keeps him calling with apologies and expressions of regret? He didn't just make a mistake about my capabilities. He revealed something about his character that he can't completely repair. When I needed family support the most, when faith would have meant everything, he chose convenience over compassion. I've forgiven him because holding grudges is exhausting, and because I love my son despite his flaws. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. Michael has to live with knowing that his mother's greatest success came after he tried to remove her from his life. He has to live with knowing that everything I achieved happened because I had to build independence he never thought I possessed. The business recovery consulting I do now often involves family dynamics around financial crisis and business failure. I see so many adult children who assume their parents are problems to be managed rather than people with the potential to recover and rebuild. I see so many older entrepreneurs who've been convinced they're finished rather than temporarily set back. My story isn't unique, except for the scale of the comeback. Most people facing financial fraud don't have the business background I possessed. Most people don't have the opportunity to build new partnerships or the resources to start over completely. But every person has more resilience than their families often recognize, especially when those families are looking for convenient solutions rather than genuine support. Michael often asks what he could have done differently, how he could have supported me without feeling overwhelmed by my crisis. The answer is simple but not easy. He could have had honest conversations about boundaries instead of secret conversations about removal. He could have asked what I needed instead of deciding what I should accept. He could have trusted that the woman who built a $3 million business from nothing might be capable of rebuilding. But maybe this ending is better than any alternative. Maybe Michael needed to lose me to understand my value. Maybe I needed his betrayal to discover strength I didn't know I possessed. Maybe our family needed to break apart completely before we could rebuild on foundations of mutual respect, rather than assumed dependency. The woman who moved into Michael's guest room after losing everything to fraud was broken, humiliated, and defined by her recent failure. The woman I became in Los Angeles was independent, successful, and capable of building relationships based on mutual respect rather than desperate need. My son thought I was finished when I lost everything. He saw a broken woman who needed management, not a fighter who needed support. I didn't need his charity. I needed his faith in my ability to recover. Sometimes losing everything is the beginning, not the end. And sometimes the people who underestimate you give you the motivation to exceed every expectation they never bothered to have. And Michael? He still calls regularly, still apologizes, still marvels at what I've built from the betrayal he thought would end me. 20 years later, he's learned that the people you underestimate might just be the ones who exceed every expectation you never bothered to have. He recently told me, "Mom, I thought I was protecting our family by solving your problem. I never realized I was throwing away the strongest person I knew." That acknowledgement means something, but it doesn't change the fact that when I needed faith, he chose fear. When I needed support, he chose convenience. But here's the beautiful irony of this entire story. Michael's cruel attempt to remove me from his life became the catalyst for building something far greater than what I'd lost. His betrayal taught me that I didn't need anyone's permission to rebuild, anyone's approval to succeed, or anyone's belief in my capabilities to prove them wrong. The fraud that stole $3 million led to building a $47 million empire. The son who planned my permanent removal now seeks my counsel on his biggest decisions. The guest room charity case became the family success story that everyone points to with pride. Most importantly, I learned that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you sets up the best thing that could happen to you. David Chen's fraud destroyed my old life, but created space for a better one. Michael's betrayal broke my heart, but forced me to discover strength I didn't know I possessed. Today, when I speak to fraud victims beginning their recovery journey, I tell them what I wish someone had told me during those darkest months in Michael's guest room. The people who count you out during your lowest moment reveal more about their character than yours. Your comeback will be the greatest gift you give yourself and the biggest surprise you give them. If this story of resilience, revenge through success, and family redemption inspired you, please subscribe and share it with anyone who needs to remember that being underestimated is often the greatest motivation for extraordinary achievement. Tell me in the comments, what's the biggest comeback you've made after someone wrote you off? How did you prove them wrong and change your entire life?